Lucas was everything the world admired: tall, handsome, intelligent, and surrounded by wealth that seemed endless. He lived in a sprawling mansion perched atop a hill, overlooking a city that sparkled at night like a sea of stars. His life, from the outside, appeared perfect. Luxurious cars lined the driveway, crystal chandeliers lit the halls, and rooms overflowed with priceless art and treasures collected across generations. Yet, beneath the gleaming surface, Lucas carried a quiet emptiness. He had been adopted as a baby, taken from a world he would never know. Though he had parents who provided everything a child could ask for, they could not fill the gap left by not knowing his true origins. He often found himself staring out of grand windows, watching the world below, and wondering where he truly belonged. The mansion was a palace, but it had always felt like a gilded cage. Within this vast home, Lucas's eyes rarely fell upon Anna. She moved silently through the halls, her presence almost ethereal. A woman of modest appearance, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, Anna seemed invisible to everyone except herself. She cleaned, cooked, arranged flowers, and ensured that every detail of the household ran smoothly. She anticipated Lucas's needs before he could even voice them: a warm blanket on chilly nights, tea brewed just the way he liked it, reminders of appointments, and small notes of encouragement tucked onto his desk. Lucas, however, noticed none of it. In his mind, she was nothing more than a servant, a minor fixture in the grand tapestry of the mansion. He would sometimes frown at her when she lingered too long, sigh if she asked a question, and occasionally mutter a terse comment when she seemed to care too much. He did not realize that she watched him from afar, with a heart that loved him more than anyone could imagine. Anna had known Lucas since he was a baby. She had cared for him before he could speak, held him when he cried, and silently celebrated his first steps, first words, and first successes. Every sleepless night she endured, every quiet sacrifice she made, was an act of love. She never demanded recognition. She only wanted him to be safe, healthy, and happy. Yet, for all her devotion, Lucas had never acknowledged her presence beyond the basic respect owed to someone who served in his household. Lucas's life outside the mansion mirrored his internal emptiness. He attended high-profile events, dined with influential figures, and flaunted his charm on social media. He had friends, yes, but most were drawn to his money, his status, and his appearance. He laughed, but often it was hollow. He smiled, but sometimes the smile didn't reach his eyes. Behind the carefully curated image of perfection, he was lonely, craving connection without knowing where to find it. The irony was that the one person who had been there for him through every small crisis, every minor injury, every heartbreak he had suffered, had been right under his nose all along. Anna was the silent guardian of his life, the invisible force that had kept him from harm countless times. She cleaned the spills he didn't even notice, prepared the meals he didn't appreciate, and always seemed to know when something was wrong before he said a word. One rainy afternoon, Lucas sat alone in the study, the sound of raindrops tapping the grand windows like a persistent reminder of the emptiness around him. He stared at the piles of documents on his desk, the charts, the appointments, the endless responsibilities, and felt a creeping sense of dissatisfaction. He wondered why, despite all the accolades and wealth, a quiet ache lingered in his chest. That day, Anna brought in his tea. She placed it on the desk without a word and smiled briefly. Lucas barely glanced at her, lost in his thoughts. Yet that small gesture was one of the countless threads of love and care she had woven into his life, threads he had always ignored. As weeks passed, Lucas remained unaware of the depth of Anna's presence in his life. He focused on his studies, his business ventures, and the world outside the mansion, completely oblivious to the silent strength that had always been his anchor. Anna, however, never wavered. Her care for him was constant, patient, and unwavering. Every chore completed, every meal prepared, every thoughtful note left on his desk was a quiet testimony to a mother's love hidden behind the guise of a housekeeper. But fate, as it often does, was preparing a shift. The universe had plans to reveal truths that Lucas could no longer ignore. The life he thought was perfect was fragile. The people he overlooked were far more important than he realized, and the quiet, invisible woman he had long ignored was about to become central to his survival, his awakening, and ultimately, his redemption. In the mansion, under the grand chandeliers and polished floors, Lucas's story was only beginning. The invisible woman he had dismissed for so long would soon reveal a secret that would shatter his perception of life, family, and love forever. The morning sun had always been his companion, a symbol of control, success, and luxury. But lately, even the sunlight felt heavier. Lucas Devereux, the young billionaire everyone admired, sat alone at the long marble table of his dining room, a cup of untouched coffee before him. His reflection in the polished silver was not the man he remembered. The confident smile was gone. The spark in his eyes had faded. What stared back was exhaustion, something deeper than fatigue, fear. At first, he blamed it on stress. Too many board meetings, too many late nights in endless negotiations. He thought his body was just demanding rest. A vacation, perhaps, but as the days passed, the symptoms worsened. Nausea, dizziness, pain that lingered beneath his ribs. He dismissed it with arrogance, as he had dismissed people all his life. "I'm fine," he told his assistant, brushing off concern. "I just need sleep." But the truth does not sleep, and it does not wait. One morning, while shaving, his vision blurred. The world tilted, and his knees gave way. The razor slipped from his hand, slicing a thin red line across his cheek. He didn't even feel the sting, only the cold, terrifying realization that his body no longer obeyed him. He caught himself against the sink, breathing heavily, staring at the drops of blood on the porcelain. The man who once thought himself untouchable suddenly looked fragile, a stranger in his own skin. That was the day he finally went to the doctor. Hours later, in the sterile chill of a private clinic, he sat on the examination bed as a specialist, read through his reports with quiet gravity. When the doctor finally looked up, his eyes held that careful tone reserved for bad news. "Mr. Devereux," he began, "your liver is failing. It's genetic. You'll need a transplant soon." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated around him, detached from reality. "Genetic?" Lucas repeated, almost laughing. "I'm adopted. I don't even know who my real parents are." The doctor hesitated. "Then I'm afraid we'll have to find a donor quickly." Without one, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lucas left the clinic with trembling hands, his vision blurring again. This time, not from illness, but from disbelief. For the first time in his life, his wealth meant nothing. Money could buy houses, cars, respect, but it couldn't buy blood that matched his own. He returned home, shutting himself away from the world. The mansion that once echoed with laughter and parties now stood silent, every corner a reminder of how alone he truly was. His so-called friends sent polite messages of concern, then disappeared. His business partners began to whisper about succession. Even his fiancée, elegant, ambitious, and ever conscious of appearances, left a note on his nightstand. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I can't handle this. I hope you understand." He didn't. He couldn't. The man who had everything now had nothing, except time, slipping away like sand through his fingers. But one person stayed. Every morning, as the house lay in quiet despair, Anna arrived. She was small, with tired eyes and gentle hands, her movements silent and careful. For years, Lucas had barely noticed her. She was just the maid, invisible, like the furniture. But now, as his world darkened, she became the only light that remained. At first, he despised her presence. Her footsteps in the hallway irritated him. Her soft voice felt like pity, but she never reacted to his harshness. If he snapped, she only bowed her head and whispered, "Yes, sir." If he threw the food she brought, she quietly cleaned it and returned with fresh soup. It was infuriating, and yet comforting. One evening, after days of silence, Lucas found himself too weak to move. Sweat drenched his pillow. His breathing was shallow. Anna entered the room with a bowl of broth and a cloth. She hesitated when she saw his condition, then rushed to his side. "Don't touch me," he rasped, but she ignored him. With trembling hands, she placed the cool cloth on his forehead, wiping the sweat from his brow. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent. "Why are you here?" he muttered, his voice cracking. "Why do you care? I'm nothing to you." Her eyes filled with quiet sadness. "Because no one deserves to suffer alone," she said softly. He turned his face away, but her words lingered like a melody he couldn't forget. Days passed, then weeks, and through them all, Anna stayed, watching over him, tending to his pain, whispering prayers when she thought he couldn't hear. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Lucas would wake and see her kneeling by his bed, hands clasped, eyes closed. "Please, God," she would whisper, "give him strength. Don't take him yet." He never spoke of it, but each time he heard her prayer, something inside him cracked a little more. A wall he had built for years, the wall of pride, wealth, superiority, was slowly crumbling, stone by stone. Then, one afternoon, he asked the question that had been haunting him. "Do you have children, Anna?" She froze, the tray in her hands shaking slightly. Her lips parted, but for a moment no sound came. "I did," she finally whispered. "A son, long ago. But life took him from me before I could even hold him properly." Lucas felt a strange ache in his chest, as if her pain resonated somewhere deep within him. He nodded quietly, unable to find the right words. "I'm sorry," he said, for the first time sounding human. She smiled faintly, a smile both tender and broken. "You remind me of him sometimes," she murmured, then left the room before tears betrayed her. That night, Lucas dreamed for the first time in weeks. He saw flashes, a baby's cry, a woman's hand reaching out, the sound of rain against glass, and a lullaby in a language he couldn't remember. When he woke, his face was wet with tears. Outside his window, the dawn was breaking, pale, uncertain, like the new humility awakening in his heart. From that day forward, he began to change. He spoke less and listened more. He thanked Anna, awkwardly at first, but sincerely. And every time she smiled, he felt something unfamiliar. Peace. But his health continued to deteriorate. The doctors said time was running short. Each breath grew heavier, each step slower. His once confident stride had turned into a fragile shuffle. Anna became his anchor. She read to him, prayed with him, even sang softly when he couldn't sleep. Her presence filled the house with warmth again, not the false warmth of wealth, but the true warmth of compassion. Then came the night of the storm. Thunder rolled through the sky as if heaven itself was grieving. Lucas woke gasping, his vision spinning. He tried to call out, but his voice was barely a whisper. Within seconds, Anna was there. She grabbed his shoulders, panic flashing in her eyes. "Lucas, look at me! Stay with me!" He could barely breathe, but her voice cut through the chaos. He clutched her hand, frail fingers gripping hers with all the strength he had left. Their eyes locked, and for a brief, flickering moment, he saw something in her expression, something he couldn't name, a love deeper than duty, older than time. "Anna," he murmured weakly, "why do you care so much?" Tears filled her eyes. She brushed the hair from his forehead, her voice trembling. "Because some bonds can't be broken, no matter how far life takes us." When the doctor arrived, she refused to leave his side. She prayed as they stabilized him, whispering words he couldn't hear. And when it was over, when the monitors finally steadied, she sat beside him all night, holding his hand, the way a mother holds a child she refuses to lose again. By morning, the storm had passed. Lucas opened his eyes to see her asleep in the chair beside him, her hand still wrapped around his. For the first time in his adult life, he felt safe. As the days went on, the house was no longer silent. Laughter returned, quiet at first, but real. Anna told him stories from her childhood about faith, hope, and forgiveness. And he listened, truly listened, realizing that this woman he had treated like a shadow was the only person who had ever truly cared for him. He didn't know her secret yet, that the blood running through his veins was hers, that the heart he thought was. Failing was, in truth, calling out to the one it had known all along. But soon he would learn everything, and when he did, the world, his world, would never be the same again. The weeks that followed were quieter, softer. The mansion, once a temple of cold perfection, now carried traces of human warmth, a vase of fresh flowers in the hall, the distant hum of music from the kitchen, and the sound of laughter echoing faintly through corridors that had forgotten joy. Lucas was healing, slowly. The doctors had stabilized him, but they were clear. Without a liver transplant, his time was limited. It could be months, maybe less. He tried to accept it with dignity, but at night, when everyone slept, fear crept back into his heart like a silent visitor. He often found Anna sitting by the fireplace after her duties were done, sewing or reading her small, worn Bible. There was something comforting in her presence, the rhythm of her breathing, the way she looked at the fire, lost in thoughts. He could never guess. One evening he spoke. "You pray a lot," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. She looked up and smiled faintly. "It's the only way I know to speak to the world beyond this one." Lucas hesitated. "And does it ever answer?" Her eyes softened. "Always, but not in words. Sometimes in pain, sometimes in peace, sometimes in people we least expect." Her answer lingered in his mind long after she had gone to bed. The discovery one afternoon, as Lucas wandered through the old, east wing of the mansion, he stumbled upon a locked door he had never noticed before. The key hung nearby, old and rusted. He turned it, and the door creaked open into a forgotten storage room, dust dancing in the rays of afternoon light. Inside were boxes, old furniture, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. Curiosity pulled him forward. He rummaged through old photo albums and documents, relics of a past life that wasn't his, or so he thought. Then, hidden beneath an old trunk, he found it. Small wooden box, beautifully carved but worn by time. On the lid, faintly engraved, were the initials LD, his own. His breath caught. Hands trembling, he opened the box. Inside lay a faded baby blanket, a hospital bracelet, and a collection of letters tied together with a silk ribbon. The smell of old paper filled the room. The first letter began with handwriting so delicate it seemed to tremble on the page. "My dearest son, I don't know if you'll ever read this. They told me I had no choice, that giving you away was the only way to save your life and mine. But no day has passed that I haven't prayed for you, my child. I watched you grow from afar, hidden in the shadows, cleaning your home, tending to the world you built. You never knew me, but I was always there." A. Lucas froze. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. "A. Anna." He read the letter again, slower this time, as if each word carried the weight of his entire life. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. Could it be? Could the woman he had dismissed, humiliated, and ignored all these years be his mother? He tore through the rest of the letters, his hands shaking. Each one told a story of a young mother forced to give up her child after birth due to poverty and illness, of her years of regret, and of her desperate attempts to find him again. "When I learned who you had become," one letter read, "I asked only to serve near you, to clean your home, to see you breathe, to make sure you were safe. You didn't recognize me, and I never told you. I wanted to, so many times, but I was afraid you'd hate me, and perhaps I deserved it." By the time he finished the last letter, his tears had soaked the paper. His chest heaved with the kind of pain that no illness could cause. He clutched the blanket to his chest, sobbing, not the proud, controlled tears of a man, but the raw, broken cries of a child who had just found what he never knew he'd lost. The confrontation. That night, Lucas didn't sleep. He sat in the dark living room, the box beside him, waiting. When he heard Anna's soft footsteps at dawn, he called out, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Anna!" She froze in the doorway, startled. "Yes, sir?" He gestured toward the couch. "Please, sit." She hesitated but obeyed, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. He opened the box and placed it on the table between them. Her eyes widened instantly. She knew it. Her lips parted, but no words came. "I found this," he said softly. "And I think you have something to tell me." The silence that followed was unbearable. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the blanket, the letters, the small bracelet that had once circled his tiny wrist. "Lucas," she whispered, voice trembling. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but you hated me. You wouldn't have believed me. I thought it would only hurt you more." He shook his head, tears streaming freely now. "Why didn't you say anything? All these years, why?" She clasped her hands, trembling. "Because I wasn't worthy of being your mother anymore. You had a life I could never give you. You were safe, successful. I thought that was enough." Her voice broke and she covered her face. "But every night I prayed to God that you were happy, even if you never knew who I was." Lucas leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "You were there, every day, and I never saw you." Anna looked up, her eyes glistening. "I saw you every day, my son." The words shattered something. Inside him, he stood abruptly, pacing the room, unable to contain the storm within him. "All those times I was cruel to you. God, Anna, She rose and touched his arm gently. "You don't owe me anything, Lucas. All I ever wanted was to make sure you were safe." But he couldn't stop the tears. "No, you gave me life, and I gave you nothing but pain." She shook her head. "You gave me everything just by existing." He sank to his knees, clutching her hands. "Mother," the word felt foreign on his tongue, yet sacred. It carried the weight of years lost and the warmth of years yet to come. Anna knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around him for the first time since he was a baby. And in that embrace, time dissolved. The mansion disappeared. The pain vanished, and for one perfect moment, only love remained. The healing. In the days that followed, something changed between them. The air was lighter, the rooms brighter. For the first time in decades, Lucas allowed himself to be human, vulnerable, imperfect, real. He told her about his illness, his fear, his loneliness. She held his hand and said quietly, "We'll find a way, together." But destiny had one more miracle to offer. When the doctors ran compatibility tests for the transplant list, they discovered something astonishing. Anna's blood type was an exact match. Lucas tried to refuse. "You're too old. It's too dangerous." But Anna smiled through her tears. "I gave you life once, my son. Let me do it again." He cried that, Unday, truly cried, for the woman he had once despised and now couldn't live without. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Lucas whispered a prayer for the first time in his life, not for wealth, not for success, but for her. And somewhere beyond the heavens, perhaps, God smiled. For a mother and son had finally found each other again, not through blood alone, but through forgiveness. The first light of dawn slipped through the heavy curtains of the hospital room, casting golden stripes across the sterile floor. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, a strange mixture of disorientation and relief washing over him. The monitors beeped steadily, a rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of destiny itself. For the first time in weeks, he felt alive, not because of medicine or money, but because of something far more profound. He had been given a second chance. And beside him, as always, was Maria, the woman he had dismissed for years, the silent figure who had cared for him without recognition or reward. She sat in the chair, holding his hand loosely, her fingers worn yet gentle. Her presence was a balm to his fragile spirit, a reminder that life's true treasures were never measured in wealth. Ethan tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His throat was dry, his voice weak. Finally, a rasping whisper emerged. "You shouldn't have done this." Maria's lips curved into a soft, tired smile. A mother's love asks for nothing in return. I only wanted you to live, my son. The words struck him harder than any physical pain he had endured. His body was fragile, a mere shell after the transplant, but his heart, oh, his heart, felt something he had never known: humility. For the next several days, he remained in the hospital, refusing visitors, postponing calls, even ignoring emails. The mansion, with all its grandeur, felt empty without her. He realized painfully that no riches could replace what he had lost all those years: the love, the care, the small, oh, quiet presence of the woman who had given him life. The awakening of memories. Late one night, the hospital room was bathed in silver moonlight. Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, memories rising unbidden. He remembered a small lullaby, a soft voice singing him to sleep, a scent of warmth and bread, the gentle sway of someone rocking him when he was afraid of storms. He looked at Maria, asleep in the chair, her breathing steady but shallow. A truth settled deep within him. All those long-forgotten fragments of childhood were hers. She had been there, always. He had only failed to notice. His pride, once immense, melted into guilt. He thought of every insult, every dismissive glance, every harsh word he had ever spoken to her. And now, as she rested, weakened from giving him a part of herself, the enormity of his mistakes became unbearable. Morning came, and with it, a quiet resolve. He whispered, I will make this right. Healing together days turned into weeks. Ethan's. Recovery was slow, deliberate, but Maria's constant presence, her gentle guidance, and the comfort of her stories nourished him in ways medicine never could. She told him about her childhood, the hardships she had endured, the love she had carried in silence. Each story was a thread, weaving his fractured past into something whole. Ethan began keeping a journal, not for business, not for fame, but for himself. A record of the lessons he was learning too late, the small miracles he had once ignored. Every line he wrote was a confession, a vow and a prayer. He also began reaching out to people he had wronged, apologizing for his arrogance and cruelty. Former employees, old friends, even strangers whose kindness he had overlooked. Each apology was a step toward healing not just himself, but the world he had inhabited so carelessly. A mother's silent strength. Maria, meanwhile, grew stronger, yet the ordeal had left traces. The operation had taken a toll on her body, and though her heart remained brave, her energy was fragile, yet she never wavered in her care. One afternoon, as Ethan sat beside her bed, he noticed the faint tremor in her hands. He grasped them gently. I will take care of you now, he whispered. She smiled, eyes glistening. You already do, my son. By being alive, by living fully, that is enough. He realized then that love is not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it is in the quiet endurance, the unseen sacrifices, the patient waiting. He had been blind to it for years, and now he saw it clearly. The world outside. When Ethan was finally discharged, the world outside felt both alien and familiar. News of his illness and miraculous recovery had leaked to the press, but he refused interviews and public appearances. He wanted his redemption to be private, a sacred acknowledgement between him and his mother. He returned to the mansion, now stripped of its cold perfection and filled with warmth. The walls echoed with laughter and conversations, not just the hum of machines or the quiet footsteps of staff. And Maria finally moved in, though she insisted on keeping her modest habits, cooking, tending the small garden, organizing the home in ways Ethan had long ignored. I don't need luxury, she said gently. I only need to see you happy and alive. Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. Then we will live together, as mother and son, not as employer and employee. A transformation of the heart over the following months. Ethan's life transformed completely. He sold off several companies, donated large portions of his wealth to hospitals, orphanages, and charities. He established a foundation named The Light Within, dedicated to helping children separated from their families by circumstances beyond their control, a reflection of his own journey. But perhaps the greatest transformation was internal. He no longer measured himself by money, power, or influence. He measured himself by love, by forgiveness, by the capacity to see the humanity in others. One night, standing on the balcony of his restored home, overlooking the city lights, he whispered to the night sky, "All my life I chased wealth and status, but they were meaningless. Now I know what matters, the love we give and the lives we touch." Maria joined him silently, her hand brushing his. "And what is that, my son?" she asked softly. He turned to her, tears in his eyes, and smiled. "You, forgiveness, life, everything I almost lost." She placed her hand over his chest, feeling the heart that had been both her gift and his salvation. "God wanted this," she whispered. "He wanted us to find each other, not through blood or wealth, but through grace and love." And in that moment, Ethan understood. The miracle wasn't simply survival. It was redemption, it was reunion, it was the rekindling of the bond that no amount of time, pride, or distance could sever. The city was alive with lights and movement, but for Ethan, the world had narrowed to a single point of clarity: Maria. The woman he had once dismissed, ridiculed, and ignored had become the anchor of his soul, the living proof that love could endure even the cruelest twists of fate. Months had passed since the transplant. Ethan had recovered physically, but his emotional journey had only begun. Each morning he would wake to the sight of Maria, quietly preparing tea or tending a small corner of the garden. He would sit beside her, holding her hand, and watch the sun rise, feeling the weight of gratitude, awe, and love pressing upon him. He had also taken bold steps in his public life. Businesses that had once run under his cold, detached authority were now guided by principles of compassion, ethics, and responsibility. But with every decision, he faced skepticism from investors, scrutiny from the press, and subtle pushback from associates who had once valued power over humanity. One evening, after a long meeting with his foundation's board, Ethan returned home, his mind heavy with doubts. Maria noticed immediately, her eyes reflecting concern. "You seem burdened," she said softly, sitting beside him. "I am," he admitted. "I built my life on wealth and success. Now I want to rebuild it on love and justice. But the world, it's not ready. People don't understand." Maria reached out, gently lifting his chin. "Then lead by example. Show them the way, not with force, but with heart. That is the power you have always overlooked." Her words resonated deep within him. He realized that the final choice was not between wealth or humility, success or failure, but between living a life of selfish indulgence or a life of selfless purpose. The moment of truth arrived unexpectedly. A major journalist, aware of Ethan's miraculous recovery and mysterious donor, approached him for an exclusive story. The journalist pressed relentlessly. "People will want to know who saved you. They will want details. Are you ready for the truth?" Ethan's heart pounded. He thought of Maria sleeping quietly upstairs, still fragile from her surgery. This revelation could thrust her life into the public eye, expose her to scrutiny, admiration, or even judgment. But hiding the truth would dishonor her courage and sacrifice. He paused, then said firmly, "Yes, they deserve to know, but they must know who she really is and why she did what she did." The story broke across media outlets within hours. Headlines screamed of a billionaire's miraculous survival, of an anonymous donor, and of a mysterious act of selfless heroism. When Ethan revealed Maria's identity, his own mother, the woman he had once despised, the world reacted with a mix of shock, admiration, and envy. Social media exploded. Some called it a miracle. Others debated the ethics of her actions. But to Ethan, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that the bond of mother and son, once broken by circumstance and pride, was now unshakable. Despite the public attention, Ethan's life centered on Maria. Together they revisited the places of his childhood, the orphanage, the hospital where he was born, even the small market where she had worked to survive. Each location brought memories and tears, laughter and reconciliation. He also sought forgiveness from those he had wronged before his illness. Former employees, old friends, and distant family members who had been hurt by his arrogance were met not with excuses, but with heartfelt apologies and gestures of reconciliation. Through it all, Maria remained his anchor, quietly guiding him, reminding him that true strength came not from money, influence, or control, but from love, forgiveness, and moral courage. Ethan's foundation, the light within, expanded rapidly, aiding countless children separated from their families, supporting hospitals, and providing scholarships to those who would otherwise be forgotten. He refused to return to his former life of excess. Luxury, fame, and influence were no longer his measures of success. Instead, he measured life by how many lives he could touch, how many hearts he could heal, and how many acts of kindness he could inspire. Standing on the balcony of his restored home, overlooking the city lights, he whispered to the night sky, "All my life, I chased wealth and status, but they were meaningless. Now I know what matters, the love we give and the lives we touch." Maria joined him silently, her hand brushing his. "And what is that, my son?" she asked softly. He turned to her, tears in his eyes, and smiled. "You, forgiveness, life, everything I almost lost." She placed her hand over his chest, feeling the heart that had been both her gift and his salvation. "God wanted this," she whispered. "He wanted us to find each other, not through blood or wealth, but through grace and love." The miracle wasn't simply survival. It was redemption, reunion, and the rekindling of the bond that no amount of time, pride, or distance could sever. Just as Ethan thought, life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Fate presented one final test. An urgent crisis threatened the foundation's work. A natural disaster endangered thousands of children the foundation had supported. Ethan faced a choice: stay protected in his wealth and comfort, or risk everything to save countless lives. The decision tore at him, but Maria's presence reminded him of what truly mattered. He acted immediately, coordinating relief efforts, personally traveling to the disaster zone, and risking his own safety to ensure the children were rescued. Every action reflected the lessons of love, humility, and sacrifice that Maria had instilled in him. Through sheer courage and determination, the children were saved. Ethan's efforts earned admiration, but more importantly, he finally understood the weight and meaning of true heroism. Months later, as the foundation thrived and their lives settled into a rhythm of purpose, Ethan and Maria sat together one quiet evening. The mansion, once a symbol of cold luxury, had been transformed into a home filled with warmth, laughter, and memories. Ethan turned to Maria, tears glistening in his eyes. "I finally understand, Mother. Everything I had, everything I chased, meant nothing without you. You are the greatest treasure of my life." Maria smiled, her eyes shining with pride and love. "And you, my son, are the man I always hoped you would become. Not through wealth, not through status, but through love, courage, and the light in your heart." He held her hand, feeling the strength and fragility of the woman who had given him everything: his life, his heart, his second chance. For the first time, he truly believed that all the darkness he had endured was only to lead him back to this moment of light. The world outside would remember the billionaire's miraculous recovery, but in the quiet corners of the mansion, in the hearts of mother and son, the true miracle had always been love. Ethan closed his eyes, resting his head on Maria's shoulder, whispering softly, "Thank you for never giving up on me." Maria, smiling through her tears, replied, "I never could, my son. You were always mine, no matter what." The journey of arrogance, illness, and rediscovery had ended not with gold or accolades, but with love, forgiveness, and a legacy that would outlive them both.